The silk noose. A fragile strip of silk, light as a breath and soft as water, is usually a symbol of an artist's absolute freedom. But on one fateful afternoon in 1927, that very silk transformed into a cold-blooded assassin in less than a second. Isadora Duncan, the woman who spent her life shattering the chains of traditional dance, was ultimately stripped of her life by her own favorite fashion accessory. How could a simple scarf, a tool of beauty, become a lethal, inescapable noose? Isadora Duncan was more than just a dancer. She was a living revolution. While the world was stiffly confined in point shoes and restrictive corsets, Isadora took to the stage barefoot, draped in flowing silks. She worshipped freedom, grace, and the natural movement of the human body. To the public, she was the icon of modern beauty and seductive rebellion. She loved everything that moved fast: fiery dances, whirlwind romances, and the cutting-edge open-top cars of the era. On September 14, 1927, in the sun-drenched city of Nice, France, Isadora stepped into a luxury Amilcar sports car. Wrapped around her neck was a vibrant 2-meter-long silk scarf. Before the car pulled away, she waved to her friends and shouted, "Farewell, my friends, I go to glory." But glory was not what awaited her. The fatal twist occurred the moment the car accelerated. A gust of wind caught the trailing silk, and in a heartbeat, the scarf became entangled in the spinning rear axle. Before the driver could even hit the brakes, the soft silk turned into a high-tension steel cable, snapping Isadora's neck instantly. The glory she spoke of had become a tragic, ironic death sentence. How could such an absurd accident happen? Scientists call this the leverage of rotation. Imagine the scarf as a rope connecting Isadora's neck to a machine with dozens of horsepower. As the axle turned, it winched the scarf with such violent speed that the victim had zero time to react. The force was so immense it didn't just suffocate her, it broke her cervical vertebrae in a split second. The ultimate irony is that for her entire life, Isadora fought to break the shackles that bound women, from literal corsets to outdated social rules. She believed her flowing silks were symbols of liberation. Yet, in the end, it was that very symbol of unbinding that directly bound and ended her life. Fate had used her greatest passion to weave a noose specifically for her. Isadora Duncan left at the height of her fame, leaving a void that could never be filled, and a story that serves as a haunting reminder of life's unpredictability. The unbreakable fall. Confidence can build skyscrapers, but sometimes it is the very thing that pushes you into the abyss. On an afternoon in 1993, on the 24th floor of a Toronto high-rise, lawyer Garry Hoy decided to perform a stunt he believed was invincible. He hurled himself against a window with his full body weight to prove to a group of students that the glass was unbreakable. And he was right. The glass didn't break. Not a single crack appeared. But a second later, the room went silent in horror as Garry Hoy and his perfect pane of glass vanished into thin air. He won the argument about the strength of the glass, but he lost the war against gravity. Garry Hoy was no reckless fool. He was a brilliant lawyer, a trained engineer, and a senior member of a prestigious firm. The Toronto Dominion Center where he worked was a marvel of modern architecture, featuring massive sheets of tempered glass. Garry was so proud of the building's safety that he frequently performed his human battering ram act to reassure young interns. To him, that glass was an invisible wall, a testament to human engineering. But truth always has loopholes that logic fails to foresee. The grim twist happened on his second attempt that afternoon. Garry took a running start and slammed into the window. The tempered glass held its ground. It was as solid as ever. However, what Garry overlooked was that everything has a weak point. Instead of shattering, the sheer force of the impact caused the entire window frame to pop out of the building. The glass flew out like a magic carpet, carrying the doomed lawyer down 24 stories. Garry Hoy had become the victim of a perfect trap. The glass was too strong for the frame meant to hold it. Why did an expert make such a fundamental error? In engineering, this is known as a system failure. Imagine having a shield of impenetrable steel, but the handle is made of cheap plastic. When the enemy strikes, the shield holds, but it flies out of your hand. Garry focused so much on the hardness of the surface that he forgot the connection of the entire structure. This accident became a classic case study in engineering ethics worldwide. Skyscrapers changed the way they installed windows, ensuring frames could withstand the same pressure as the glass itself. Garry didn't die of stupidity. He died from placing absolute faith in a system he thought he understood. He paid with his life to rewrite a golden rule of engineering. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The tailor's last stitch. 2 cameras were rolling. Dozens of reporters held their breath, and all of Paris looked up at the summit of the Eiffel Tower. On the edge of the world's greatest steel wonder, a man stood in a bizarre outfit, looking like a giant silk bat perched over the abyss. For 40 agonizing seconds, he hesitated. His legs trembled, his eyes betrayed his terror, but pride ultimately won over survival. On February 4, 1912, Franz Reichelt took a leap of faith to prove his invention was greatness itself. But instead of soaring like an angel, he fell like a stone, leaving behind one of history's most haunting films on the price of obsession. Franz Reichelt was not a pilot. He was a talented Austrian tailor living in Paris. In the early 20th century, humanity was obsessed with early flight, but also mourned the many pilots dying in crashes. Franz wanted to be the savior. He spent years in his workshop designing a parachute suit that could be worn like normal clothes but would bloom into wings during a fall. To Franz, his needles and threads weren't just making clothes, they were stitching together hope for the future of aviation. After failing several tests using dummies dropped from his apartment window, Franz convinced himself the problem was height. He petitioned the Paris police to let him test a dummy from the Eiffel Tower, but the cruel twist occurred that morning. Franz arrived and announced that he would be the one to jump. Friends begged him to stop, and police tried to intervene, but Franz coldly replied, "I want to prove it myself so the world no longer doubts." He believed in his silk patches with a blind intensity, seeing them as armor against gravity. He failed to realize he was preparing for a public suicide. Why did such a brilliant mind fail so catastrophically? The answer lies in a total lack of aerodynamic knowledge. A parachute requires a massive surface area to create air resistance, but Reichelt tried to cram it into a streamlined suit. At a height of 57 meters, the fall happened too fast for the suit to deploy. It merely wrapped around him like a silk shroud. The impact was so violent, it left a 15-centimeter crater in the frozen ground. Reichelt died instantly. The saddest part is that with a simple mathematical calculation, any engineer could have told him his invention was a death warrant. But Reichelt closed his heart to warnings to protect an illusion of grandeur. His death was a tragedy of misplaced courage, teaching us that innovation must be built on the foundation of facts, not the clouds of fantasy. The fragile giant. The roar of 3,000 tons of water falling every second from the height of a 20-story building couldn't kill him. The jagged rocks at the bottom of the abyss and water pressure that could crush human bones surrendered to him. But on a sunny day in 1926, death defier Bobby Leach met a killer he never saw coming, a stray orange peel on a sidewalk. This isn't a dark joke. It is the story of one of the most ironic deaths in history, where the line between a legend and a victim was drawn by a single slip. In the early 20th century, Bobby Leach was a titan of the daredevil world. In 1911, he performed an insane stunt, climbing into a steel and wood barrel and allowing the raging currents of Niagara Falls to sweep him over the edge. When the barrel was recovered, it was mangled, and Bobby had shattered both kneecaps and his jaw. But he survived. He became only the second person in history to conquer the water monster. To the public, Bobby Leach was an unbreakable fortress, a man who could dance with death and walk away. But fate always keeps a card that no one can calculate. After 15 years of living as a superhero, Bobby was walking down a mundane street in New Zealand. The cruel twist came when he accidentally stepped on an orange peel. He didn't fall into an abyss, he just hit the hard ground. An accident any child could have, but for Bobby, the fall caused a severe leg fracture. The twist turned lethal when, in an era of poor hygiene, bacteria invaded the wound, causing massive gangrene. Doctors were forced to amputate his leg, but it was too late. Sepsis had entered his blood, forcing the man who beat Niagara Falls to surrender to a piece of trash. Why did an orange peel have more power than a massive waterfall? The answer lies in complacency and a grim medical reality. In 1926, humanity had no antibiotics. A wound not treated perfectly could quickly become a biological firestorm. Bobby Leach's sacrifice became a legend of life's irony. He spent his life building steel fortresses against massive pressures, but left a pinhole-sized vulnerability right under his heel. It proves that we can master technology and conquer the great wonders of the world, yet remain forever fragile before the most trivial variables of reality. Sometimes, what brings down a giant isn't a sharp sword, but a moment of inattention on a quiet day. Tickling the dragon. 6.2 kilograms of metal. It was compact, shiny, and sat silently on a lab table like a harmless toy. But inside that sphere was enough power to wipe out an entire city. Scientists called it the Demon Core. On a late night in 1945, young physicist Harry Daghlian accidentally woke this monster with a single misplaced brick. There was no explosion, no smoke, only a sudden, haunting flash of blue light. In that microsecond, Harry knew he hadn't made a discovery. He had just signed his own death warrant with a touch from hell. In 1945, at the top-secret Los Alamos laboratory, the nuclear race was at its peak. Harry Daghlian, a 24-year-old genius, was working with a 6.2-kilogram plutonium sphere. This was the heart of the third atomic bomb, intended for Japan if the war had continued. Scientists at the time had a dangerous game they called tickling the dragon's tail. They would push the nuclear mass to the very edge of criticality to measure its power, believing their brilliant minds could control the fire with simple manual movements. But dragons do not like to be teased. On the night of August 21st, Harry was working alone, a violation of every safety protocol. He was building a wall of tungsten carbide bricks around the core to reflect neutrons back into it. The fatal twist happened as he held the final brick. It slipped from his hand and fell directly onto the sphere. In an instant, the brick acted as a mirror, reflecting so many neutrons that the core went supercritical. A massive burst of gamma radiation erupted, creating the signature blue glow of death. Harry frantically knocked the brick off with his hand, saving the city from a disaster. But his body had already absorbed a dose of radiation enough to kill a man dozens of times over. Radiation doesn't kill through external wounds. It is a demolition ball at the molecular level. Imagine billions of subatomic particles screaming through your body at the speed of light, smashing DNA strands like throwing stones at a kaleidoscope. For the next 25 days, the world watched Harry Daghlian literally disintegrate. His hands swelled, his skin blistered and peeled in large sheets, and his internal organs failed as his cells lost the ability to regenerate. The terrifying part is that this core wasn't finished. A year later, it killed another scientist, Louis Slotin, in a near-identical accident, officially cementing its title as the Demon Core. This inanimate metal seemed to possess an evil soul. It didn't need to be dropped from a plane to kill. It only needed human complacency to strike. Harry's death ended the era of reckless manual experiments and gave birth to the remote-controlled safety systems we use today. The invisible handcuffs, steel chains, reinforced vaults, or iron tanks filled with water. Nothing could hold this man. For decades, Harry Houdini turned cheating death into a performance art. The world believed he was an immortal god who could escape any lock or physical barrier ever devised. But in 1926, a brutal paradox occurred. The greatest escape artist in history fell to a set of handcuffs he couldn't pick: his own body. Harry Houdini was the icon of willpower and extreme endurance. To perform his impossible escapes, he trained his body into a perfect machine. He could hold his breath for 3 minutes under ice water and possessed abs of steel to endure powerful blows. Houdini didn't just sell magic, he sold the belief that humans could overcome every law of nature. To the public, Houdini was an unassailable fortress. But fate always has a darker, magic trick. The cruel twist began in a dressing room in Montreal, when a student asked Houdini if his stomach could truly withstand any punch. Before Houdini could properly brace himself, a key technique to protect his organs, the young man delivered 3 lightning-fast punches to his abdomen. Houdini smiled and continued the show, but beneath his skin, a biological disaster had ignited. His appendix was already inflamed, and those punches acted like matches thrown into a powder keg. The most painful twist? Houdini, blinded by his own myth of invincibility, refused to go to the hospital. He performed his final show with a 104-degree fever while his body was being ravaged by infection. Why would a man as smart as Houdini let himself die so needlessly? In medicine, this is called the betrayal of pride. When his appendix ruptured, it released billions of bacteria into his abdominal cavity, causing peritonitis, a death sentence in an era without strong antibiotics. Modern scientists debate whether the punches directly caused the rupture or simply masked the pain, so Houdini didn't realize the severity of his illness. Either way, the invincible mask Houdini built became the cage that trapped him. He was so used to enduring pain for the sake of the performance that his brain ignored his body's final SOS. On Halloween night, 1926, the escape god took his last breath. He escaped the strongest vaults but failed to escape a 10-centimeter piece of intestine. It serves as a reminder: we can conquer the world, but if we fail to listen to the one home we have, our body, every escape becomes meaningless. The world is still full of hidden truths and stories that defy belief. If you're ready to uncover more of the most incredible and disturbing mysteries of our history, subscribe to Oddplane. Don't let the next story pass you by. Join us, and let's explore the unknown together. Thank you for watching, and stay curious. Goodbye.